Jessica stood at the top of the grand marble staircase of the Cho estate, her custom silk gown shimmering under the crystal chandeliers like liquid gold. Her dark skin glowed against the champagne fabric, her braids swept into an elegant updo adorned with diamonds that caught the light with every breath. 500 of Seoul's most powerful elites raised their glasses below, toasting to 3 years of unbreakable union. She smiled, her hand instinctively moving to the tiny ultrasound picture hidden in her clutch, the surprise that would change everything. Then, the massive projector screens flickered to life. The tribute video she'd carefully prepared never played. Instead, the screens filled with a different image, her husband, Cho Yang-yoon. The feared head of the Cho syndicate stood in the estate's coat room with another woman pressed close to him. His hands rested firmly at Minna's waist, a familiarity Jessica had not felt in months. The woman's red lips brushed his neck as she leaned into him, her fingers tangled in his hair. He did not pull away. Instead, he held her as if the rest of the world did not exist. Jessica froze, the sight draining all warmth from her blood. The ballroom fell silent. Crystals stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. 500 pairs of eyes turned from the screens to Jessica, frozen under the spotlight like a specimen pinned for examination. Yang-eun appeared at the edge of the ballroom, Minna's lipstick still staining his collar. He didn't run. He didn't apologize. He walked to the stage with the same cold calculation he used to dismantle rival gangs, his sharp jawline set, his three-piece charcoal suit immaculate, despite the betrayal it concealed. He took the microphone, and when his tired, predatory eyes met Jessica's, there wasn't even a flicker of remorse. "Every contract has an expiration date," he said, his voice cutting through the suffocating silence like a blade. "Ours ends tonight." He crossed the ballroom floor, climbed the stairs, and extended his hand, not to comfort her, but to present her with divorce papers. The cameras flashed, the paparazzi circled like vultures, and Jessica, with the ultrasound of their children pressed against her heart, realized she'd never meant anything more to him than a signature on a contract. What happens when Jessica returns 5 years later with 4 carbon copies of the man who threw her away? Welcome to Seoul Africa Stories. Besties, subscribe if you are new to the channel, like and drop a comment if you need to see Yang-yoon's face when he realizes what he lost. And also tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. I want to personally say hello and see how far this story reaches. Now, Jessica's fingers closed around the ultrasound image as Yang-yoon descended the stairs, the divorce papers still extended toward her like a weapon. The ballroom held its breath. She could feel every eye on her, waiting to see if the discarded wife would crumble, would beg, would make a scene worthy of tomorrow's headlines. Instead, she took the papers. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't break. "I understand," she said, and the steadiness of her tone seemed to unsettle him more than tears ever could. Yang-eun's expression flickered, just for a moment, before the ice reformed. "You'll have 72 hours to vacate the residence. My attorney will handle the details." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Jessica? Whatever complications resulted from our arrangement, I trust you'll handle them appropriately. The Cho bloodline doesn't need dilution." The ultrasound in her clutch suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He didn't know. He thought she was just another discarded piece of his empire, unaware that she carried 4 pieces of his legacy beneath her heart. Minna appeared at his elbow, her designer gown glittering with crystals that screamed of desperation dressed as confidence. Her makeup was flawless, but it couldn't hide the triumph in her eyes as she looked at Jessica. "Some women are meant to be wives," she said, her voice sugared with venom. "Others are just meant to be temporary." Yang-eun didn't correct her. He simply placed his hand on Minna's lower back and guided her toward the crowd, leaving Jessica alone on the staircase like a portrait that no longer matched the decor. The guests began to murmur. Cameras flashed, and Jessica, still clutching the ultrasound of 4 children who would never know their father, walked down the stairs with her head high and disappeared into the Seoul night. 23 hours later, Jessica sat in a private medical clinic, staring at the ultrasound screen as the doctor pointed to 4 distinct heartbeats. "Quadruplets," the doctor said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. 2 boys, 2 girls. It's incredibly rare, and given the circumstances, you'll need excellent prenatal care." "Not in Seoul," Jessica whispered. "I need to leave. Tonight." The doctor's eyes filled with understanding. She'd seen the news. Everyone had. I have a colleague in London. Let me make a call. By midnight, Jessica was in her former home, the sprawling Cho estate that had never truly felt like hers, packing a single suitcase. Everything else, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the carefully curated life, belonged to a woman who no longer existed. She took her passport, her architecture portfolio, and the ultrasound image. Nothing else mattered. The gate guard didn't stop her when she left. Yang Eun's orders had been clear. She was already gone. At Incheon Airport, Jessica stood at the departure gate, her hand pressed against her stomach where 4 tiny lives grew. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something unexpected: relief. For 3 years, she'd molded herself into the perfect wife for a man who treated marriage like a business merger. She'd silenced her opinions, dimmed her brilliance, made herself smaller so he could feel larger. No more. The flight to London was 13 hours long. Jessica spent every moment planning. She had her savings, money she'd earned from freelance architectural projects Yang Eun had never bothered to ask about. She had her degree from one of the top architecture programs in the world, and she had something Yang Eun would never understand: the ability to build something from nothing. When the plane touched down at Heathrow, a black car was waiting. The driver held a sign with her name, but it wasn't her name anymore. It read Ms. J. Okonkwo, her maiden name, the name of her father, the name she should never have given up. The car took her to a townhouse in Kensington. The door opened before she could knock, and a man stepped out, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of wealth earned, not inherited. Park Jin-ho, formerly of the Seoul Underground, now a legitimate businessman in London. He'd been Yang Eun's rival once, before Yang Eun had forced him out of Korea with threats and calculated moves. Ms. Okonkwo, Jin-ho said, extending his hand. I received Dr. Kim's call. Welcome to London. Jessica studied him carefully. Why would you help me? You know who my husband is. Former husband, Jin-ho corrected with a slight smile. And I'm helping you precisely because I know who he is. Yang Eun believes people are chess pieces to be moved and discarded. You're about to prove him wrong. He gestured toward the townhouse. This property is yours, no strings attached. Consider it an investment in the future. I don't accept charity, Jessica said. It's not charity, it's strategy. Jin-ho's eyes glinted. Yang Eun destroyed many things when he took control of Seoul, but he made one critical error. He underestimated everyone who wasn't him. You have 5 months until those children arrive. Use them to become someone he can never dismiss again. Jessica looked at the townhouse, then at Jin-ho, then down at her stomach. I will. The next 5 months were a blur of preparation. Jessica enrolled in an advanced architectural certification program, adding British qualifications to her already impressive credentials. She worked with Jin-ho's network, building connections with Europe's top architectural firms. She attended prenatal appointments, ate properly, rested when her body demanded it, and spent every other waking moment designing. Her portfolio grew. Buildings that sang with innovation, structures that honored heritage while embracing the future. Designs that made senior architects pause and ask, who is this woman? When the contractions started on a rainy March morning, Jessica was in the middle of sketching a cultural center. She calmly closed her portfolio, called her doctor, and took a taxi to the hospital. Jin-ho met her there, not as a friend, they weren't friends, but as the closest thing she had to family in this new world. The delivery took 14 hours. When it was over, Jessica held 4 tiny humans, each one perfect and impossibly small. The boys had Yang Eun's sharp features softened by her own gentle curves. The girls had her soulful eyes framed by Yang Eun's distinctive brow. They looked like little royals, just as they were, though their father would never know. Names? The nurse asked. Jessica looked at her children, these 4 pieces of her heart that she'd carried through abandonment and exile. Zuri and Amara, she said, nodding toward the girls. Kofi and Malik, she said, looking at the boys. Each name meant something. Beautiful. Grace. Born on Friday. King. They would know their heritage, both sides of it, even if their father never acknowledged them. Quick pause before we go on. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and then we'll continue. The years that followed were a careful construction. Each day, a brick in the empire Jessica was building. She worked from home initially, taking projects she could complete while the quadruplets slept. As they grew, she hired a nanny, a kind woman named Margaret, who treated the children like her own grandchildren. Jessica's reputation grew. Her designs won awards. Firms across Europe sought her expertise. And when the children turned 3, she opened her own practice, Okonkwo International Architecture. Her first major project was a museum in Barcelona. Her second was a sustainable housing complex in Amsterdam. Her third was a government building in Oslo. By the time the children were 5, Jessica's name was spoken in the same breath as the world's architectural legends. She was the woman who'd revolutionized cultural spaces, who understood how to make buildings breathe with the soul of their communities. She dressed in impeccably tailored power suits in cream and emerald, her hair styled in sharp bobs or intricate braids that celebrated her heritage. When she walked into a room, conversations paused, not because of scandal, but because of respect. The children grew into remarkable humans. Zuri was quiet but observant, with a mind that absorbed everything like a sponge. Amara was bold and fearless, always the first to try something new. Kofi was gentle and thoughtful, already showing an artistic temperament. Malik was protective and strategic, always watching over his siblings with careful eyes. They wore miniature designer suits and high-end dresses, not because Jessica was trying to prove anything, but because she wanted them to know their worth. They attended the best schools. They spoke 3 languages. They knew they were loved beyond measure. And they never asked about their father, because Jessica had told them a simple truth. Some people don't know how to see treasure when it's right in front of them. But that's okay, because we see each other, and that's what matters. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Jessica was in her London office, reviewing designs, when her assistant buzzed through. "Miss Okonkwo, there's a call from the Seoul Metropolitan Development Authority. They're requesting a meeting about the Hanggang Cultural Complex project." Jessica's pen stopped mid-stroke. The Hanggang Complex was the most ambitious urban redevelopment project in South Korea's history, a $5 billion undertaking that would reshape Seoul's waterfront. Every major architectural firm in the world had submitted proposals. Jessica had submitted hers 3 months ago, never truly believing she'd be selected. "They want me?" Jessica asked. "They want to offer you the lead position, but there's a condition. You'd need to relocate to Seoul for the 3-year construction period." Seoul, the city that had spit her out like something distasteful. The city where Yangun still ruled his empire from the shadows. The city that had watched her humiliation and done nothing. Jessica looked at the photograph on her desk, her 4 children on their 5th birthday, laughing as they destroyed a cake shaped like a castle. They deserved to know their heritage. Both sides of it, and Yang Yun deserved to see exactly what he'd thrown away. "Tell them yes," Jessica said. "We'll be there in 3 weeks." Margaret helped her pack, asking no questions but offering knowing looks. Jinho called to offer support and resources. "He'll find out you're back within days," Jinho warned. "Are you ready for that?" "He's not ready for me," Jessica replied. The flight to Seoul was different from the one she'd taken 5 years earlier. This time, she wasn't fleeing. This time, she had 4 children in first class with her, each one excited about the adventure. This time, she was returning as someone who'd built an empire from the ashes of her broken marriage. Incheon Airport was exactly as she remembered, but Jessica was nothing like the woman who'd left. She walked through customs with her head high, her children holding hands in a perfect line, her assistant managing the logistics. Cameras flashed. Someone had tipped off the press about the famous architect's arrival, but Jessica simply smiled and kept walking. The company had arranged a penthouse apartment in Gangnam, far from the Cho estate, but close enough to the project site. The children loved it immediately, running from room to room, claiming spaces, planning where their toys would go. That night, after the children were asleep, Jessica stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. Somewhere in that sea of lights, Yangun was living his life, probably still with Minna, probably never thinking about the wife he'd discarded. He was about to learn a very painful lesson. Some things, once thrown away, come back stronger than before. The first week passed quietly. Jessica toured the project site, met with contractors, reviewed plans. She kept a low profile, focusing on work, keeping the children's schedules private. They attended an international school under tight security, not because she was paranoid, but because she was careful. On the 8th day, Jessica took the children to Hangang Park. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm and perfect, and the kids needed to run and play after a week of adjustments. She sat on a bench, watching them climb and laugh, their joy so pure it made her chest ache. She didn't see him approach, didn't sense the shift in the air until a shadow fell across her bench. Jessica. His voice was exactly as she remembered, cold, controlled, sharp as a blade. She looked up slowly, letting him see the complete absence of emotion on her face. Yang-eun stood there in charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, his predatory jawline as sharp as ever, his eyes tired in a way that 5 years hadn't erased. "Mr. Cho," she said, her voice professionally pleasant, as if he were a stranger. What an unexpected encounter. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she wasn't falling apart at the sight of him. His eyes moved past her to the playground, and Jessica saw the exact moment he registered the children. 4 children. 4 5-year-olds with his distinctive brow and hair texture, with features that were unmistakably Cho combined with unmistakably Okonkwo. 4 children who were laughing and playing, completely unaware that their father was standing 30 feet away, staring at them like he'd seen a ghost. Yang-eun's face went pale. His jaw clenched. When his eyes snapped back to Jessica, there was something in them she'd never seen before. Shock, so complete it shattered his carefully maintained control. "Those children," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me those aren't. They're none of your concern." Jessica interrupted, standing up and smoothing her emerald power suit. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to collect my family." She walked toward the playground, calling her children's names. They ran to her immediately, and she herded them toward the parking lot without looking back. But she could feel Yang-eun's eyes on them, could sense his world tilting on its axis. Good. Let him wonder. Let him realize what he'd thrown away. Let him understand that the woman he'd discarded had become someone far more powerful than he'd ever imagined. The war had just begun, and this time, Jessica was holding all the cards. If you're hooked and need to see what Yang-eun does next, drop a in the comments and tell me which character you're rooting for, Jessica or the quadruplets. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Yang-eun tries to claim what he abandoned. Let me know what city you're watching from. I love saying hello to everyone following this story. Jessica didn't sleep that night. She stood at the penthouse windows watching Seoul's lights blur through her exhaustion, knowing that Yang-eun would come.